She was only trying to serve a bowl of soup. One cruel hand changed her life forever. The woman who humiliated her thought everyone in the restaurant would laugh and forget. But she was wrong. Because just a few tables away, a man in a dark suit saw everything. And he was not just any customer. He owned the entire restaurant. It was a warm Friday afternoon in Lagos. The Coral Crown restaurant was full of elegant guests, soft piano music, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with sizzling spices from the kitchen. Waiters moved carefully between tables, balancing trays, smiling politely, and pretending not to feel the pressure that came with serving the rich. Amara Nidlovu, a 23-year-old waitress with kind eyes and tired feet, carried a steaming bowl of seafood pepper soup toward the private dining section. Her uniform was clean and neatly pressed, but the collar was slightly worn. She had ironed it herself before sunrise. Her black shoes were old, and one heel leaned slightly to the side, but she walked with care. This job mattered too much to lose. At table 7 sat Zuri Bello, a famous fashion influencer and the daughter of one of the city's most powerful businessmen. She wore gold earrings the size of small suns and a fitted emerald dress that drew attention the moment she walked in. Around her sat two friends, laughing too loudly at everything she said. Zuri enjoyed being watched. She had built her life on it. As Amara approached, one of the chairs stuck out unexpectedly. She turned slightly to avoid it, and a single drop of soup landed on the edge of Zuri's silk sleeve. The whole table fell silent. Amara froze. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she said quickly. "It was an accident. Let me get a napkin." But Zuri slowly looked at the stain, then at Amara, as if a fly had landed on her skin. "An accident?" she said coldly. Before anyone could react, Zuri snatched the bowl from Amara's tray and flung the soup straight onto Amara's chest. The liquid splashed across her apron, her hands, and the front of her uniform. A spoon hit the floor with a sharp, metallic sound. Gasps spread across the room. Zuri leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Now we're even," she said. "Maybe next time, village girl, you'll learn how to serve people who matter." Amara's lips parted, but no words came out. Her face burned, her fingers trembled. But she did not cry. Not there. Not in front of them. Across the room, a man seated alone beside the window lowered his glass of water and watched with narrowed eyes. His name was Kofi Mensah. Few people recognized him when he dressed simply and came without security. But Coral Crown was his flagship restaurant, and half the hospitality business district answered to his name. He had seen arrogance before. He had seen cruelty in polished shoes and designer smiles. But something about the way Amara stood there, humiliated, soaked, and still trying not to break, hid a place in him he had not visited in years. He looked toward his assistant, who sat 2 tables away pretending to review emails. "Find out who she is," Kofi said quietly. "Today." Amara changed into a spare uniform in the staff washroom 10 minutes later. The replacement blouse was too large at the shoulders, and the apron strings had begun to fray. She scrubbed pepper stains from her neck with cold water and stared at herself in the mirror. "Do not cry," she whispered. If she cried, her eyes would swell. If her eyes swelled, the floor manager would notice. If the floor manager noticed, he would ask questions. And in places like Coral Crown, questions were dangerous for people like Amara. By evening, the story had already spread among the staff. Some pitied her. Some avoided her. A few blamed her. You know how guests like that are, one server muttered while folding napkins. It's better not to get too close. Amara said nothing. She finished her shift, counted her transport money twice, and took the late bus home. Home was a narrow one-room apartment in Surulere with cracked cream walls and a single standing fan that only worked when the power stayed on. Her 12-year-old brother, Toby, sat on the floor doing homework by the window when she entered. "You're late," he said, looking up with a smile. Then he saw her face. "Amara, what happened?" She forced a smile and set her bag down. "Nothing serious, just a long day." But Toby had grown up too fast. He knew when silence meant pain. That night, after he fell asleep, Amara opened the metal box beneath her bed. Inside were small savings notes, a recipe notebook, and a folded brochure from the Royal School of Culinary Arts. She had picked it up 6 months earlier and kept it like a secret prayer. Ever since their mother died, Amara had done whatever work she could find, washing dishes, cleaning tables, serving guests, anything that kept rent paid and Toby in school. Still, in the quiet corners of her heart, she dreamed of becoming a chef. Not just any chef, a pastry chef. Someone who could turn flour, sugar, and patience into beauty. The next morning, Kofi received Amara's file in his office. Amara Ndlovu, his assistant said. Age 23, works double shifts 4 days a week, lives with her younger brother. No parents listed. Good staff record. Guests have left positive notes about her manners. Kofi studied the attached photo. In it, Amara stood beside a birthday cake she had decorated herself for a staff celebration. The frosting roses were delicate. The piping was clean. Her smile, though small, was real. "What else?" he asked. The assistant flipped another page. Before joining the restaurant floor, she spent 3 months helping in prep kitchen during staff shortages. The pastry supervisor noted she had unusual talent. Kofi tapped the paper once. "Move her into the morning dessert section twice a week," he said. The assistant hesitated. "Without explanation?" Kofi looked up. "Yes," quietly. The following Monday, Amara arrived before sunrise and opened her locker. Inside sat a fresh croissant wrapped in paper, a bottle of orange juice, and a small note in neat handwriting. For the one who stayed graceful when others chose disgrace. She looked around in confusion. No one seemed to notice. Her stomach tightened. She had not eaten breakfast. She usually never did on early shifts, so Toby could have enough before school. Slowly, she unwrapped the croissant. It was still warm. For the first time in days, her eyes softened. Later that morning, the pastry supervisor called her into the back kitchen. "Amara, we're short-staffed on dessert plating," he said. "You're helping us twice a week from now on." She blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you. Don't make me repeat myself. Apron on." The pastry section felt like another world. Instead of loud complaints and clinking wine glasses, there was focus. Measured sugar, glossy chocolate, soft cream, fruit cut with precision. Amara moved carefully, watching everything. Within an hour, she was piping whipped cream swirls with such steady hands that even the supervisor paused. "What training have you had?" he asked. "None," she said. "Just practice, at home, whenever I can." He grunted, pretending not to be impressed. But he was. At noon, Kofi walked through the kitchen in a plain navy shirt, speaking casually with managers. His eyes found Amara for only a second, but that second told him enough. Her movements were quiet, efficient, natural. She treated each plate as though someone's happiness depended on it. In many ways, it did. Across town, Zuri Bello was in her penthouse recording a skincare brand campaign for her millions of followers. "Glow is power," she said into the camera with a perfect smile. The moment the recording stopped, her face changed. "Why is this lighting so dull?" she snapped. "Do I have to do everything myself?" Her assistant lowered her eyes. "I'll fix it." Zuri tossed her phone onto the sofa. "And call Coral Crown, that waitress from Friday. Make sure they know I don't want her near my table again." "What was her name?" the assistant asked. Zuri waved a hand. "I don't remember. The poor one." She truly did not. To Zuri, people without status blurred together. Back at Coral Crown, Amara's small transfer to dessert work created whispers. Some staff were happy for her, others were not. One of them was Chiamaka, called Chica by everyone in the kitchen. She had worked there 6 years and expected every new opportunity to pass through her hands first. "So now she's special?" Chica said under her breath while tempering chocolate. "Interesting." Amara heard it, but stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that poor people survived by enduring what others were too proud to bear. Over the next 2 weeks, more anonymous kindnesses appeared. A pair of non-slip shoes in her locker. A book on pastry basics with no name inside. An envelope containing transport fare on a day heavy rain flooded the roads. Each time, the same feeling returned. Someone was seeing her. Not with pity, with intention. One evening, while leaving through the rear staff entrance, Amara saw the man from the restaurant window standing beneath the awning, checking his watch as rain tapped against the pavement. He looked familiar. Very familiar. When he noticed her, he lifted his head. "You were at table 10 that day," she said before she could stop herself. A small smile touched his mouth. "You remember faces?" "I have to. It's part of the job." He glanced toward the rain. "You're walking home in this?" "I'll take the bus." "It may not come soon. The roads are bad." Amara tightened her grip on her bag. "I'll manage." Kofi studied her for a moment. Pride, caution, dignity. He recognized all three. "At least take this," he said, handing her a black umbrella. She hesitated. "I can't." "You can," he said softly. "Just return it another day." Their fingers brushed for half a second as she took the handle. "Thank you, sir." As she stepped into the rain, Kofi watched her go and thought of his own mother, who had once cleaned hotel corridors with swollen feet and still came home smiling so her son would never fear poverty more than he feared hopelessness. The next week, Coral Crown prepared for a high-profile charity dinner. Guess who was on the guest list? Zuri Bello. The moment Amara saw the name on the event sheet, her stomach sank. All day she kept her head down and worked twice as hard. The event began at 7. Crystal glasses sparkled. Cameras flashed. Donors posed for photos beneath floral arches. Zuri arrived in silver satin, arm-linked with a businessman twice her age, and expected the room to move around her. When she noticed Amara carrying dessert trays near the back section, her lips curved. "Well," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "they still let you wander around with food." Amara stopped, bowed her head slightly, and said, "Enjoy your evening, ma'am." That refusal to react irritated Zuri more than anger ever could. Later, in the kitchen, disaster struck. A tray of signature caramel tarts went out with salt instead of sugar in the glaze. The guest who tasted one immediately complained. The pastry supervisor stormed back, furious. "Who prepared Station 3? Amara looked up in shock. "I did the tart shells, sir, but I checked the glaze." "Check again!" he shouted. The batch was ruined. The supervisor's face hardened. "One more mistake like this, and you're back on dish duty permanently." Amara felt the room spin. She knew she had measured carefully. From the far end of the corridor, Kofi had already been informed. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. He simply requested the kitchen surveillance footage. 20 minutes later, the truth appeared on screen. Chica, looking over her shoulder, had switched the labeled containers before service. Silence fell over the office. Chica's mouth opened, then closed. The pastry supervisor turned to Amara. "I owe you an apology." Amara nodded once, unable to speak. Kofi stood near the door, unseen by most of them, and watched her reaction. No triumphant smile, no revenge in her eyes, only relief. That told him even more than talent did. The next morning, Amara found another note in her locker. People can block a doorway, but they cannot stop what is meant to rise. Under the note was a registration form. Royal School of Culinary Arts, Evening Certificate Program. Half her body went cold. Half went warm. When the kitchen manager called her upstairs later, she entered expecting another correction. Instead, she found Kofi standing beside the office window. No disguise this time. No plain shirt. He wore a charcoal suit and carried the quiet authority of a man used to being obeyed. Amara stopped mid-step. "You," she whispered. Kofi turned. "Yes, me." She looked from him to the manager, then back again. "You own Coral Crown." "I do." "And the umbrella, the notes, the shoes." Kofi gave a faint smile. "Some of them." Amara's throat tightened. "Why?" He was silent for a moment before answering. "Because I saw what happened that day. And I also saw what happened after. Most people break when humiliation becomes public. You did not. You kept serving. You kept working. You kept your dignity when someone tried to strip it from you." She looked down, embarrassed by the praise. "I was only doing my job." "No," Kofi said gently. "You were showing your character." He slid the registration form across the desk. "I want to sponsor your culinary training." Amara stared at the paper as though it might disappear if she blinked too hard. "I can't afford this." "You won't have to." "Sir, I don't want charity." "Good," he replied. "Neither do I. I invest in talent. And I think you are one of the best investments I've ever seen." For the first time, Amara's composure cracked. Her eyes filled, and she turned slightly away. No one had spoken to her future like that before. Not even she had dared. That evening, she told Toby everything. He jumped up from the mattress so fast he nearly knocked over the kerosene lamp. "You're going to culinary school?" he shouted. "Evening classes," she said, laughing through tears. Toby threw his arms around her. "Mama would have danced." Amara closed her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "She would have." But while hope entered one home, bitterness grew in another. Zuri heard about Amara's sponsorship within days. Coral Crown's staff gossip traveled quickly, especially when a powerful owner was involved. "She got a scholarship?" Zuri said, setting down her wine glass. "From Kofi Mensa?" Her assistant nodded carefully. Zuri laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That waitress?" When she later saw Kofi speaking to Amara near the pastry counter, something ugly twisted in her chest. She had spent years attending the same events as Kofi, trying to draw his attention with beauty, reputation, and access. He had always been polite and distant. Now he was looking at a poor waitress as if she were worth listening to. Zuri could not bear it. A few days later, she waited for Amara outside the restaurant. As Amara stepped out after shift, Zuri removed her sunglasses slowly and leaned against her car. "So it's true," she said. "You've become important." Amara stiffened. "Good evening, ma'am." "Save the manners. Tell me, what exactly did you do? Cry in the right corner? Smile at the billionaire? Pretend to be innocent?" Amara looked her in the eye. "I did my work." Zuri laughed. "Men like Kofi don't choose girls like you. They rescue them for sport and forget them by morning. Don't mistake attention for destiny." Amara's heart shook, but her voice stayed calm. "I'm not asking to be chosen," she said. "I'm trying to become someone." For a second, even Zuri had no answer. Then she slid back into her car and drove off, irritated by a woman who refused to shrink. Classes began the next month. Every evening after work, Amara took a crowded bus across town to the Culinary Institute. She learned technique, temperature, balance, structure. She practiced sponge cakes at midnight in a borrowed kitchen corner. She burned her fingers. She redid sauces. She took notes until her wrists hurt. And she loved every second of it. Kofi never hovered. He never treated her like a possession. He simply made sure doors opened when they should, and when they opened, Amara walked through them by merit. Respect came first, then friendship, then something quieter and more dangerous. One night after class, Kofi waited outside the school gate with 2 cups of tea. "You work too hard," he said, handing one to her. She smiled. "That sounds strange coming from you." He chuckled. "Fair." They walked slowly toward the road. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "Why pastry?" Amara looked up at the night sky before answering. "Because life has been bitter for a long time. I think I fell in love with the idea that something small and careful can still become sweet." Kofi looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened beyond business, beyond admiration. By the end of that week, trouble returned. A gossip blog posted an article with the headline, "Waitress Catches Billionaire's Eye After Restaurant Drama." The story suggested Amara had manipulated her way into Kofi's favor. It called her ambitious in the cruelest possible way. It implied she was using poverty as a ladder. The article spread quickly. At work, the stares returned. At school, 2 classmates whispered when she entered. On the bus, a woman looked up from her phone, recognized her photo, and stared openly. Amara held herself together until she reached home. Then she sat on the floor beside her bed and finally cried. Not because strangers had spoken, but because lies were so much easier for the world to believe about girls like her. Kofi saw the article within an hour. By nightfall, his legal team had traced the payment behind the post. It led back to an account connected to one of Zuri's media consultants. He did not call Zuri. He did not threaten her in private. Instead, the next afternoon, He scheduled a press briefing at Coral Crown. Cameras gathered. Food bloggers came. Business reporters came. Even Zuri watched the live stream from her penthouse, expecting careful corporate language. But Kofi stood at the podium and spoke with a clarity that silenced the room. Amara Ndlovu is not where she is because of pity, he said. She is here because talent, discipline, and dignity deserve recognition. Anyone who calls hard work manipulation reveals more about their own values than hers. He paused, then added, "This restaurant will never apologize for investing in excellence, no matter what shoes excellence arrives in." By evening, the clip had gone viral. For the first time, the world heard someone powerful defend a poor woman without trying to own her story. When Amara watched the video on Toby's cracked phone screen, she covered her mouth and shook with silent tears. A delivery arrived that night. Inside the box was a single vanilla millefeuille from the pastry kitchen and a handwritten card. "Let them talk. Your work will always speak louder." K. Amara pressed the card to her chest. Months passed. The city changed season. So did she. Her posture grew steadier. Her voice, though still gentle, no longer disappeared in rooms. Her instructors praised her sugar work. The restaurant managers began asking for her input on dessert menus. Guests requested her plated cakes by name. She was still humble, but she was no longer invisible. Zuri, meanwhile, kept falling. When her father discovered her connection to the smear campaign, he was furious. "You embarrassed this family over jealousy," he said in disbelief. "She stole my place," Zuri snapped. "No," he replied coldly. "She earned a place you never learned how to deserve." He cut off her discretionary accounts, removed her from the board of their foundation, and told her not to show her face at public charity events for the rest of the quarter. For the first time in years, silence followed Zuri where applause once had. One evening, nearly a year after the soup incident, Kofi invited Amara to dinner on the private rooftop terrace of Coral Crown. Not as owner and employee, not as sponsor and student, simply as two people who had walked a difficult road toward each other. She wore a simple navy dress, no diamonds, no designer labels. She did not need them. The city lights glowed beneath the night air. Soft jazz floated above candlelight. Kofi waited until dessert arrived before speaking. "I have attended dinners with queens, investors, ministers, and celebrities," he said. "And I have never been this nervous." Amara laughed softly. "Why?" "Because tonight is the only one that matters." The laughter in her eyes faded into something warmer. Kofi leaned forward slightly. "I admired your strength before I knew your dreams. Then I admired your dreams before I admitted what I felt. I do not want to rush you. I do not want to make your life harder, but I would regret silence more than rejection." Amara held his gaze. "In a world full of noise," he said quietly, "you are the calm I keep returning to." Her heart beat so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "I was afraid," she confessed. "Afraid that kindness would disappear. Afraid that one day I would wake up and all of this would feel borrowed." Kofi reached across the table, not touching her yet, only offering the space. "Nothing about you is borrowed," he said. "Not your talent, not your rise, not your worth." This time, she placed her hand in his. A year to the week after that public humiliation, Coral Crown held its anniversary gala. The grand ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and white roses. Politicians came, artists came, investors came. Every major lifestyle page in the city wanted photos from the event. And then, Amara entered. She wore a soft gold gown that caught the light when she moved. Her hair was styled neatly away from her face. Her confidence arrived before her smile did. People turned. Some recognized her immediately, not as the waitress from the scandal, as the new junior pastry consultant whose seasonal dessert line had become the restaurant's most talked-about feature. Kofi stood at the staircase waiting, not above her, beside her. When the director called her to the stage, the room quieted. A crystal plaque rested on velvet beside the microphone. For excellence, resilience, and the spirit that transformed not only our kitchen, but our understanding of leadership, the director announced. We honor Amara Nglovu. Applause filled the ballroom. Amara took a breath and stepped forward. A year ago, she began. I stood in this building wearing a stained uniform and wondering how much humiliation a person could survive before something inside them died. The room went still. But I learned something. Cruelty can embarrass you. It can delay you. It can wound you. But it cannot define you unless you hand it the pen. A murmur of approval moved through the crowd. I also learned that kindness is not softness. Kindness is power. Real power sees people. Real power makes room. Real power does not ask where someone came from before deciding whether they matter. She looked toward Kofi then, and her smile deepened. I stand here tonight because I kept working, because my brother kept believing, because my mother's prayers outlived her, and because one person chose to see dignity where the world expected silence. Several guests wiped their eyes. Even some staff at the back stood taller. After the speeches, the music softened and the ballroom drifted into late-night elegance. Amara slipped away for a few minutes and walked alone into the quiet private dining hall. Table 7 was empty. The same table. The same polished wood. The same corner where shame had once entered her life dressed in silk and perfume. A moment later, Kofi joined her. You disappeared, he said gently. She looked at the table and smiled to herself. I wanted to see it one more time. The place where it started? She nodded. Kofi stood beside her in silence. Then Amara placed her palm lightly on the back of the chair where Zuri had once sat. This was the place where someone tried to make me feel small, she said. And somehow, it became the place where my life opened. Kofi watched her carefully. Do you hate her? Amara thought about it. The soup, the laughter, the gossip, the months of pain. Then she slowly shook her head. No, she said. I hate what she did, but if I keep carrying her darkness, it will ask to live in me. I've come too far for that. Kofi smiled, and this time there was pride in it deeper than romance. You really are extraordinary. Amara turned toward him. No. I'm just finally becoming who I was always meant to be. From the far end of the hallway, unseen by the guests, Zuri stood in shadow. She had come quietly, invited only because her father insisted she learn what grace looked like when it belonged to someone else. She saw Amara in gold, saw Kofi at her side, saw a room full of people rising not for beauty, not for status, but for character. For the first time in her life, Zuri understood the poverty she had always feared most. Not empty pockets, an empty heart. She left without speaking. Inside the hall, Kofi reached into his jacket pocket and brought out a small velvet box. Amara's breath caught. He smiled softly. "Before you panic, open it." Inside was not a ring. It was a silver pastry knife engraved with her initials. She looked up in surprise. Kofi laughed. "The ring can wait. This comes first." Tears filled her eyes. He remembered. "I remember everything about you," he said. On the handle, beneath her initials, were the words, "For the woman who turned pain into art." Amara's fingers closed around it as if holding proof of her own life. Then Kofi bent slightly and said the words that made her heart bloom in complete stillness. "Walk with me, Amara, for as long as life gives us road." She smiled through tears. Yes. Not because he was rich, not because he had power, but because when the world watched her fall, he had seen her stand. And because in all the rooms she had entered since that day, the one place she finally belonged was beside someone who respected the woman she had fought to become. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, the music rose. And somewhere beyond the ballroom lights, beyond the gossip, beyond the memory of hot soup and cruel laughter, a new story was beginning. Not the story of a poor waitress rescued by a powerful man, but the story of a gifted woman who kept her dignity, found her voice, and rose so high that even those who once looked down on her had no choice but to look up. And that was the real victory.